So let's start off looking at our onTrigger event. We're going to start that with our bullet script. So we're going to go to the bullet script, and when we're working with an onTrigger enter, this is another function. We're going to put this one below our function update. So let's go and we're just going to call this our function. And it's our onTrigger enter. And in our onTrigger enter, we're going to be using other collider, and just to refresh you on what that is and what it does, you can go into your API and you can look for your collision type, and in the collider class we've got an onTrigger enter function, and when you look at that, it's basically saying it's looking for a collider, and a collider is called when the collider enters a trigger. So we got to make sure that we have a collider, that we've got a trigger. And what we want to do is we want to say that when our object, which is the bullet, collides with another object, then we want to do something to that object. We want to be able to, for instance, destroy that object, or play an explosion, or reset the position of the object, especially in our case, because we're going to be dealing with a bullet going up, which might hit an asteroid, and when it hits the asteroid, we just want to simply reset that position, play that randomness, and then drop the asteroid again. So, inside our onTrigger enter, let's do one thing first. Let's simply just test for a trigger event. So we're going to go in and we're simply going to print to the console. We'll say we hit something. And then let's say we actually want to find out what was it that we hit. So onTrigger enter, we're going to get our other, and we're going to print that. Print other dot name. And let's see if that works. We may have to adjust that one. And we'll look over here. Not getting any errors right now, so let's go ahead and run this one. And there we go. Now when we do this, we see we hit something, and it's saying that the name of this object is the prefab player. So it's taking the prefab player into account. Now we also hit the asteroid, so we hit something, the asteroid, and our prefab player. Now because we're hitting both objects, is because we're loading our object, instantiating that object a little bit close to our player object. But it does bring up a good point. We are going to be hitting a lot of different objects inside the scene, so we need to be able to isolate what is it that we're actually hitting, and what do we want to hit, so that we do the right thing to the right object. So onTrigger enter, we'll go back in here, and this time we're going to basically check for what we hit. And we can do this just by looking for a tag. So we're going to check for the asteroid, and we'll say with a conditional if, let's say other.gameObject, because that's what it is, dot, now what do we want to do? We want to check for a tag. So let's go to our game objects. And in the API, we can find our game object here. And we'll scroll down a little bit. We're going to look for something under our variables called tag, the tag of this game object. So this is a way for us just to find objects inside of the scene and compare objects. So here, the tag is just simply a string. So we're going to be looking for a string variable. And a tag can be used to identify a game object. And here you can see how it's being declared. It's just gameObject.tag equals player. So let's go up here, and we're going to say other.gameObject.tag, and we're going to say if that's equal to, and in parentheses because this is a string, and then we say, well, what is it exactly we're trying to find? So if we go back over here into Unity, and we can see that right now our tag is untagged. Well, let's go in and actually add a tag to this. We'll do add tag. We're going to go into our inspector on the tags, and we'll go in and let's just label some of these. We've got some leftovers from other things. We'll go into our element 01. In fact, we go ahead and take this back down to just our one element. And we'll call this one, let's just call this, it's our asteroid, so we'll call it an asteroid. And then remember that the inspector is just using whatever it is that we've selected, so we no longer have our object selected, so we can go back over to our bullet prefab. And on the bullet prefab, we're going to go back to our tag, and we can see that down here we have our asteroid right in here. So let's go ahead and select on this one. So we've got it tagged as asteroid, so inside of our check for the asteroid tag right in here, we're going to call this asteroid. That way, if it has that tag on it, it'll do the right thing. And let's do another print statement. We're going to say we hit the asteroid. So we'll go back in, we'll hit play. And let's see if we can get it to catch it. And if we don't quite catch it, then we have to start going, then what is it that we're trying to do in this one? We can go back into here, make sure that our asteroid in the hierarchy has the right one. We check up here on our asteroid here, and we can see that we actually went in and made just a simple mistake. We went in and said prefab bullet, and we tagged that with the asteroid. So we'll go ahead and take that back to our untagged. So these are those types of little mistakes you can make, and just be aware that if it doesn't quite function the way that you expect it to function, then most likely it's a simple mistake somewhere in the chain of things that you do. So we'll go back into that asteroid here, check our tag it asteroid. We can see that our prefab is just the way we want it, so let's hit play again and try it one more time. There we go. So it says we hit the asteroid. That means it made it to the on trigger enter. It made it into the if statement. It said that it was equal to the asteroid, and then it printed out we hit the asteroid. So far so good. Now the other thing we can do is start checking for, well, if we are going to hit this object, what do we want to do with it? In our case, we actually want to take this object and we want to set it back up to the top and then randomly place its position, a lot like we did before in our asteroid script. In fact, identical to what we did right in here. So let's go ahead and take this one. We'll just copy this from asteroid script. We're going to paste it into our bullet script. There we go. Let's save that one out. Let's go back over. We'll hit play on this one. And see if we can hit it. Now if we do hit it, and we don't quite get the event, that's where we get to play detective for a moment and see what it is that we just did and why it did or didn't work. So we took our transform position, we took our transform position in the random range, but what is it that we're actually doing? On this on trigger enter with the other collider, other is the asteroid. So remember that this is the bullet, this represents the bullet object, so it's on the trigger event, it's at the other object. So we need to make sure that we're doing other dot transform dot position. So we're getting the object that we're colliding with, its transform in position, and the other dot transform x random range here. So now let's save it. Let's try this again. There we go. So every time we hit with it, it gets reset back up. Very nice. And you can see how these are just some, every once in a while you can make just very simple mistakes and just kind of take a moment, step back, relook at what you just did, make sure that you're calling to the right object, make sure that what you want to happen is happening. And generally it's just a common sense kind of thing. If you're shooting it and you think it's supposed to do something but it's not, generally it's just somewhere in the code we just haven't connected with the right object that we're trying to work with. So there we go. We've got an onTriggerEnter event. We're shooting the object, we're repositioning that object, and then we're having that object continue to fall down on us so that it looks like we've got a continuous stream of objects to worry about. Alright, next thing we want to do, we're going to work with instantiating an object after our onTriggerEnter. We'll do that one next.